Honoring Sean Taylor 15 years later. That's what the Commanders are hopefully going to do the right way. Plus, a couple of roster tweaks and Super Bowl odds. Yes, we get to talk about those here in Washington now on the Locked On Commanders podcast. Come and join us.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Commanders fans, we welcome you aboard one and all right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast, and a very happy Thanksgiving to all of you out there, and we appreciate you being with us. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, Odyssey, and the WUSA 9 Plus app on your Roku or Amazon Fire Stick. Again, we thank you for making us your first listen and view of the day. My co-host, David Harrison, is off on this particular episode. He is covering the Washington Commanders for Commander Country on Sports Illustrated and SI.com's FanNation, I should say. I'm Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Ned Hirsch Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app, which you can find live Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to noon, or anytime, again, along with this show on the Odyssey app. Just a note, this Thursday and Friday, we're off from the local radio side, but you can catch me nationally on CBS Sports Radio and the Odyssey app, 3 to 6 Eastern on Thanksgiving Day and 6 to 10 p.m. Eastern time on Friday night. When we're not here or there, we're on Twitter, David at DHarrison82, me at Russell, the show at LO Commanders. Try and put up as much information as we can. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. That's right, LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, we start with this. The Washington Commanders announced on Tuesday their plans to honor the legacy of the late, great Sean Taylor 15 years after his murder. They put out a press release in which they initially did something wrong that was pointed out quickly by our pal Eric Flack at WUSA 9 TV. But on the 15th anniversary of Sean Taylor's passing, during the Week 12 matchup against the Atlanta Falcons this Sunday, November 27th, 1 o'clock Eastern time, they will honor again the life and legacy of the great Sean T forever. Remember him at FedExField with all sorts of different key activations and tributes, and also reveal the Sean Taylor Memorial installation. What exactly that is, don't know. We believe it's a statue, but we're not sure, or at least I'm not sure. Also, the launch of the limited edition Sean Taylor Legacy Project merchandise line and a special 21 helmet decal to be worn by Commanders players on Sunday. So basically, if you're going to FedExField, what they're going to do is have the installation before the game at 11:45 on the main concourse outside of section 132. Again, if you're going to the game, I'm sure they'll have this on all their social media if you're not. But basically, again, they started this earlier this year on Sean's birthday, which is April 1st. And now they're basically allowing, and this is the culmination of fans to pay tribute to Sean, and also, again, launch the Legacy Project limited edition memorabilia line, which was designed and authorized by Sean's daughter, Jackie, who has been very, very, very involved in honoring her dad, as she should be. Also, Sean's little brother, who plays at Rice, was at the game last week. Don't know if he's going to be there this week. Don't know if Pedro and the family are going to be there this week or not. They were obviously there for the botched homecoming last year. But basically, they're going to have this line of merchandise that you can buy and salute and purchase in honor of Sean at the team store. And available online through Fanatics. And the most important part of this is all proceeds from the merchandise will benefit gun violence prevention initiatives. So that's a very, very good thing. Obviously, that is ultimately what led to Sean Taylor's untimely demise. Dan and Tanya Snyder issued a statement through the press release, of course. Quote, Sean's life was tragically cut short, but his impact continues to reverberate through our Burgundy and Gold family. This Sunday, on the 15th anniversary of his passing, we honor one of our greats and his legacy by unveiling a permanent installation so his memory is always with us when we take the field on game day. I'll just say this. I just passed Sean's locker that they have at FedExField that was at the Ashburn facility just a couple of weeks ago. I think it was before the Minnesota game, I believe it was. Maybe it was the Tennessee game. I can't remember. And I didn't get to cover Sean personally, just from afar. Unfortunately, he passed away before I was on the beat. Unfortunately, he passed away. Has nothing to do with me being on the beat, quite honestly. But you hear so many great stories and think of all the memories, and you see his locker and the way it was left. It gives you chills every time. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the team has come up with in terms of a permanent, as they're calling it, installation tribute to Sean Taylor. So looking very much forward to that, guys. And, hopefully, listen, the team took a lot of criticism last year for a rushed, activation to retire Sean's number, and they didn't announce it until 4 days before, 5 days before, and a lot of team fans had sold their tickets and all that. Then they took pictures in front of porta potties. There was a very, very, very rushed element to it, right? It just did not go well. I remember talking to team executives behind the scenes about it, and look, they admit that they rushed it and they made a mistake. What they didn't admit was that they were probably trying to swing the momentum from bad Dan Snyder news, which had just come out earlier that week, to more positive news, and the focus being that. So hopefully this is just done the right way, and there is very, very, very little lost in the actual true meaning of honoring Sean on his 15th anniversary. I can't believe it's been 15 years already. Rest in peace, 21. We all miss you, even those of us that don't know you. And again, hoping that everybody gets to come out and celebrate the life and the legacy of Sean Taylor. And that's how we'll leave our opening segment right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast. Again, just make sure that it goes well. Coming up, how the Commander Super Bowl odds have changed, and maybe not for the better. That's next on the Locked On Commanders podcast. But first, a word from our sponsor. This show is brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Unfortunately, guys, life doesn't come with a user manual. So when it's not working for you, it's normal to feel stuck. Therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy and the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex engine called you. That's right. This is a complex engine. Trust me, it is pretty complex. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, secure, and accessible anywhere, guys. 100% online. You don't have to go anywhere. Everyone deserves to feel their best. Feel their best physically, feel their best emotionally, feel their best mentally. BetterHelp makes it easier to get started, especially with the holidays coming, guys. You don't want to feel alone, even if you are alone. As the world's largest therapy service, they've matched millions of people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists, available 100% online. All the benefits of in-person therapy, again, just more convenient. Fill out a brief questionnaire, you match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist at any time. It couldn't be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Here's what you're going to do. Get unstuck with BetterHelp. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's better, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Commanders fans, we welcome you back for another round of the Locked On Commanders podcast. Thanks for making LOC your first listen and first watch of the day. For your second listen and watch, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast with Peter Bukowski and or friends. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. It's Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right. Let's start with this. You think the Commanders have won 5 out of 6, right? They're 6-5. They're on the hunt, playoff chase, big home game against the Atlanta Falcons this Sunday, right? We just talked about honoring Sean T. Emotions will be in the building, no doubt about it. The Atlanta Falcons lost Kyle Pitts. They have Marcus Mariota. He kind of not great, but I guess he could break you down if your pass rush doesn't get to him and corral him. But according to our friends at Bet Online, their odds to win Super Bowl 57 have actually gone up from the initial preseason, pre-draft, pre-free agency, pre-Carson Wentz, pre-everything, Jahan Dotson and more odds set back in February of 2022 by Bet Online. So the odds to win Super Bowl 57 in Glendale, Arizona are these. First, the Commanders had gone from 50-1 in February of 2022. Again, that was after the name change, about 3 weeks after, up to 125-1. Then they hovered back and forth over the offseason. Then all the way up to 400-1 after they were 1-4 in mid-October, down to 300-1. And then 200-1 as they beat the Bears and the Colts, back up to 300-1 after the Vikings loss, back to 125-1 after the Eagles Monday night win. And then finally, you sort of guessed it. Well, maybe you didn't guess it. 100-1 after beating the Houston Texans. Now, you might say, how could they be 100-1 when they were 50-1 in February of earlier this year? Well, they were expected to be better than 6-5 by the odds makers, at Bet Online, right? And the line moved all over the place, and the odds moved all over the place, and right now they're 100-1. Now, take solace in it, right? Still might be worth a couple of dollars for you at Bet Online. They have the same odds as the New York Jets, who don't have a very good quarterback situation either, if we're being honest, and maybe a worse one, because they have the number 2 overall pick, and not very good right now. The Commanders have a former number 2 overall pick, and he's obviously not able to help them at this point. Wasn't very good when he was playing as well. They are ahead of the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers, for whatever it's worth, at 125-1, and their opponent this week, the Atlanta Falcons, at 150-1. All right, this from footballoutsiders.com. The entire AFC East, the Jets we just talked about, the Miami Dolphins off the bye, the New England Patriots with a big win over the Jets late, and of course, the Buffalo Bills with a win in Detroit, and they're playing again in Detroit, but this time against the surging Lions on Thanksgiving Thursday. The chances for the entire AFC East to make the playoffs, 20.6%. You might say, well, Chris, this is the Locked On Commanders podcast. We don't care about those 4 teams. The chances for the entire NFC East to make the playoffs, and again, this would be the first time that an entire division makes the playoffs because of the new 3 wild card, 4-team format, 8.7%. So 20.6% for the AFC East, only 8.7% for the NFC East. Both Eastern divisions filling all wild card slots, 1.9%. So the Eagles are 9-1. The Cowboys are 7-3. So are the Giants. And they play each other on Thanksgiving Thursday in Dallas. Washington at 6-5. Now, Seattle, they're off their bye. They were at 6-4. They're the 7th seed right now. They host the Raiders on Sunday in Seattle. They would have the same conference record as Washington if Washington were to beat Atlanta at 4-4. But if the Seahawks lose to the Raiders, and again, the Raiders won in Denver last week in overtime, they would be 6-5, which is what Washington is now. Washington, if they win, would be 7-5, so technically ahead of the Seattle Seahawks, but obviously the Seahawks have 1 game in hand. So just a little snapshot of Super Bowl odds that all four teams from the same division in both the AFC East and NFC East could go to the playoffs. How about this? We'll leave you with this for right now. Taylor Heineke selling, believe, I can't even say it without laughing. Quote, F it, Terry, down there somewhere. End quote, t-shirts. I found this on JP Finley's Twitter. I don't really follow a lot of athletes on Twitter or on Instagram. I mean, it in a nutshell, it's Taylor Heineke, right? So go get yourself a F it, Terry down there somewhere shirt on Taylor Heineke's social media. Coming up, is Daron Payne guaranteed to stay? Ron Rivera addresses that next, right here on LOC. Thanks for being with us. And now, a word from our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. Guys, you know that these days, every new potential hire can be a big-time proposition, right? A big-time gamble, but not if you have LinkedIn Jobs on your side. You want to be 100% certain? That's why you got to have LinkedIn Jobs. They're going to help you find the right people for your team faster and more efficiently and for free. Here's what you do. You add your job that you're looking to hire for, then add the hashtag purple hiring frame on your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are open for business. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in developing quality hires versus leading competitors, because you get screening questions that it makes it easier to focus and whittle down the candidates and to hire the right person. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. You see it on your screen if you're watching on YouTube. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, back here and wrapping up the Locked On Commanders podcast for this midweek edition. David back before Thanksgiving with a crossover Thursday edition, which will lead, of course, into Thanksgiving holiday. So Rivera told my colleague at 106.7 The Fan and Odyssey DC, JP Finley, who also works for NBC Sports Washington, I believe that was this interview was for that. That keeping John Allen and Daron Payne together is indeed the plan. Oh, really? Shocker. But here's what Rivera said. Quote, it's going to be hard, but we're going to do it. End quote. Now, the big issue, the big question that will loom is it a long-term deal for Daron Payne, or is it a one-year franchise tag? Of course, we don't have the answer to that. We won't find the answer to that until late February, early March. My hunch, just my guess, we'll be doing the one-year franchise tag, which will probably cost the Commanders around $18 or $19 million per year. Obviously, you want to avoid that one-year hefty investment because the price generally is not going to go down, almost always not going to go down for an ascending player. And Daron Payne is clearly ascending. He is much more consistent this year, clearly ascending. I'd prefer the long-term deal. If you can get that done, it's going to cost you in the neighborhood, if not more, of Jonathan Allen's deal. We'll talk more about that as the offseason rolls along. But clearly, you can keep him with the franchise tag at least for 1 year. And if you wanted to, you could do it for 2 more years if you really wanted to. Again, if you want to. The Commanders have also designated Milo Eifler, special teamer and linebacker, to return to practice to start his 21-day window. That was first reported by Zach Selby, who has been a guest here on the Locked On Commanders podcast before. And that brings us to wrapping up the situation on Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke. David and I discussed this, as everybody has been discussing, on the last episode and really the post-game episode as well. So if you missed that, check it out. So as of Tuesday night, and this is the best I can do for you guys, Wentz has not been designated to return to practice yet. Now, that may change on Wednesday. So by the time you watch this, by the time you listen to it, it may have changed. And we'll update it at LO Commanders. And obviously, David will have you covered in terms of the next episode, the Crossover Thursday edition. But he needs to practice and be good enough to practice in order to get activated to the actual 53. He hasn't even, again, as of this moment, been designated to return. He needs to then be put on the 53 and at least be, presumably, the backup to Taylor Heineke before he could even think about replacing Taylor in the starting lineup. So again, there's a chain of activities here. He hadn't even been activated to practice yet. And then he has to practice successfully without pain, without problems, then get activated to the 53 before we even think about whether he is going to be the starting quarterback or not. So I think Taylor Heineke, obviously, is more than safe for this week, clearly. I think Sam Howell will be the backup quarterback. I think that's pretty clear. I would say you don't need to have Carson Wentz this week. But if Carson Wentz can practice this week, or certainly next week, there's a more than good chance that he could be the backup at least for the first of two in a row against the New York Giants, December 4th at MetLife Stadium. And is it possible, if he practices all this week, does or doesn't get activated to the 53-man roster, and practices all of next week, and if Taylor Heineke has a poor performance against Atlanta, or they lose, and or both, that Carson Wentz is the starter on December 4th in New Jersey? It is possible, guys. It is possible. I think if Ron ultimately had his true choice, he would choose Carson Wentz. I think. I don't know that, but I think he would. I think he's been very tepid, very lukewarm in his compliments and praise for Taylor Heineke, understandably so. Taylor Heineke has not thrown a touchdown pass again in almost 9 full quarters. They've won 2 road games in that span, but they did blow the Vikings game, and one more touchdown pass would have won that game. Just something to think about. By the time, again, you watch and listen to this, Wentz could be activated. Maybe he's not. If he's not activated on Wednesday, he's probably not getting activated to practice at any point this week, right? So then maybe it would take another week. And then again, he's got to practice first and be successful in practice and show them what they need to see with 5-6 weeks of rust before we even think of him getting activated to the 53. Look at how long it took Chase Young to get activated to the 53 after his 21-day activation window, again, was put in place. That was 3 weeks ago, guys, and there's still not even a guarantee, even though he's on the 53, as we, again, discussed in the last episode, that he's going to play this Sunday against the Atlanta Falcons. By the way, Ron Rivera did say if Chase plays, probably around 12, 13, 14 plays, somewhere in that range, somehow. Listen, one final note. Sam Howell's only playing if Taylor Heineke gets injured this Sunday. Sam Howell is not going to replace Taylor Heineke in the starting lineup unless the team eliminated from the playoffs down the road and they're playing out the string. And that's not looking likely, at least as of this point. One other note, actually 2 other notes. My guy, Will Compton, who I covered as an undrafted linebacker out of Nebraska, I think starting in 2013, maybe 2014, can't remember, is back with the Falcons, or with the Falcons, and back at FedExField this Sunday. Welcome back, Comp. Of course, many of you know him from Bussin' with the Boys on Barstool Sports. Comp's a good dude. I can't wait to see him and say hello to him on Sunday. And also, Terry McLaurin is the Washington Commanders nominee for the 2022 Art Rooney Sportsmanship Award. All right, that is going to do it for us on the Locked On Commanders podcast. We thank you again for making us your first view and listen of the day. Come on back for the next episode. Again, David will have a crossover Thursday bleeding into Thanksgiving Day for you, and then we will round out the week on Friday with a live episode, our go-home episode, where we actually predict who's going to win and give you bold predictions that sometimes turned out to be true, like mine did last week. Got to pat myself on the back. All right, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, from the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports. Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. It's Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, Odyssey, and wherever you get your podcasts. You want to hop in, it's 301-615-3577 on the voicemail, 301-615-3577. That's going to do it for us today. Again, we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Thanks for making us available, or thanks for downloading, thanks for watching. watching. Thanks for subscribing. All of that. For David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for SI.com's FanNation and Commander Country, I'm Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Her Show on the Team 980 and always live, free and on demand on the Odyssey app. Again, David back with a crossover Thursday edition as we get you set for the Falcons and the Washington Commanders. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Please be safe, enjoy, spend time with your family, watch lots of football, and eat lots of good food. Love you. Thanks for the support right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast.